Hey, welcome to this shortwave radio channel, and you've all been waiting for this one. It's the review of the Light Melody SB, the Mlite 880 portable receiver that is kind of an SDR. And word of caution, because I got hammered by a few users because of that. Yes, designed by a Russian team, made in China. So, depending on your personal way of being, you might not want to buy this. It all depends on your beliefs and your own way of thinking. And I totally understand that with the complex situation. Now, that said, what is this? This is a long wave, medium wave, short wave VHF receiver. It is all mode, so AM, FM, SSB, CW. It has it all. It is a SDR, so what you see here is a display that shows the center frequency where you're tuned to, and on each side it shows you the about 40 kilohertz of spectrum on each side, 40 or 50 kilohertz, so you could see signals that are nearby when there's multiple signals. Like the blue LED is turned on right now. That's actually interesting features that if you have a MLA30, you have a magnetic loop that requires a bias T to power. You can actually remove the bias T and power it from the antenna connector here directly. So when the blue LED is on, that means that it is ready to power your magnetic loop antenna. This receiver is complex. There's a lot of menus, so when you press buttons, you got setup menus that you got to understand that you're going to go through, and that have several different options and often multiple pages. So this radio is not for the faint of heart, first of all, because you got to go through all of these menus and understand how all of that works and what it means. And you're left on your own quite a lot on this, so you need to have some knowledge about radio receivers and the radio options that are available. But I found one thing interesting is that the way it's been designed, these menus are kind of easy to flow through. And from the start, without even reading the manual, I found it not that complex to go through. It's just that you got to look at the menus, the offers, the things that it offers, the things that it can do. And, if you don't know something, you can always Google it or whatever and just ask, okay, what's this? What's that? What does it mean? There's a lot of things that you can actually customize on this radio. On the performance side, the radio is actually quite good. It is a little finicky if you're using the telescopic. That's probably the place where I put it. I would put a kind of a negative note. On telescopic, it isn't that sensitive, and especially the lower you go, the less it is going to be. There's no internal ferrite, so if you try to listen to medium wave on this with the telescopic, forget this is crappy for that. You have to have an external antenna. So if you want to take this with you somewhere and just have the radio and tune medium wave or the very low frequencies of shortwave, you're going to be kind of disappointed on the performance. With a piece of wire with a roll-up antenna like the CNGN ENT60 or things like that, definitely will improve everything. That's for sure. The radio on an external antenna performs great. You have to play with the AGC gain because it easily overloads if you push it too high. That's just a question of finding the correct setting in the AGC gain for the radio. And once again, all of that happens within the receiver's menus where you go through and try to find the different options. And going through the menus is kind of easy because, like you see, the AGC gain is here. Also, you could see it very well, but A is simple, pages. You go through pages. If there's something to customize in an option, there's a number in front of the menus. So you say, I want to change the gain. It says 3. I'll press the number 3. It highlights. And now with the tuning knob, I change the number of that option. Kind of pretty easy to use. And D is always your I want to get out of here button. So it's simple. You get back to the radio. Has several bandwidths, so no problem with that. So from very small bandwidths to large bandwidths. Has FM with RDS option. We're going to do a lot of videos. I'm probably going to create a playlist and go through the menus and explain stuff. And that will probably be kind of an online Mlite 880 visual manual of the different options and how to change things around. Audio through the speaker is not bad. You could have audio go through Bluetooth to a device. Unfortunately, Bluetooth is a iffy thing. It works or it doesn't. And I've got 6 or 7 devices here that have Bluetooth. Only 2 connect. The other ones it doesn't work. And I got a couple of messages and emails of people saying, do you have problems with Bluetooth? Yes, definitely this thing on Bluetooth has issues. It depends on what you have as a device. The receive, like I said, is pretty good. Single sideband works great. You have calibration capability. What's nice, they put 2 calibration capabilities. Because this radio goes all the way up to about 150, 160 megahertz, 150, just above the 2-meter band. The higher you go in frequency, often the more you need to try to fix the precision of frequency. Because when it tells you it's accurate and, 3 parts per million, well, you got to remember that 3 parts per million at 10 megahertz and 3 parts per million at 150 megahertz doesn't mean exactly the same thing. So they let you calibrate on the higher frequency independently from the lower frequency. So I calibrated, for example, the 2-meter band for VHF. And I calibrated for shortwave. The calibration is holding on. It's pretty good for that. And so this is nice. It has as a flaw on telescopic because it has the antenna modes IZ and 50 ohms. 50 ohms is if you're using a standard antenna. Usually they're 50 ohms. An amateur radio antenna, for example, will be 50 ohms. If you use a random wire, you need to put the menu at IZ. Same with the telescopic. If you live in an area where there's a lot of FM stations, there's going to be a lot of FM breakthrough, and it is annoying as hell. So that's something to note. So there's a few negatives about this radio for that. But, there's a way to compensate. And if you put external antennas, use a magnetic loop. Usually it isn't a problem. And on the 50 ohms input, it doesn't seem to be a problem. So the filtering seems to be different. Of course, you could put an SD card, record anything you're listening to, which is really a good, nice feature. People love that. No muting when you tune. People are going to enjoy that. And you can see here there's a peak of WRMI. You can see how the peak moves depending on my tuning. So you can find these stations like that. Precision in the frequency display is very, very good, up to the 10th of hertz. And like I said, frequency calibration available, so you can go on, say, WWV, calibrate, and then you know that the frequency is precise on the frequency. And you've got tons of tuning steps if you want to work with the radio and tuning around, say, the amateur radio bands or utilities and so on. The display is kind of an SDR display, but we'll call it half of an SDR display because it's only the top part. So what's missing is a waterfall. Now, consider that this screen is very small. It's kind of difficult to have both, but they could have had, and the idea that I would push for the team of the Mlite 880, how about a button that switches between the part where you see the signal and the waterfall? So you just press a button and you see it just a waterfall. Press a button, you come back to the main screen with that signal. That would be kind of nice, especially with those stations that have these graphics design that go through the waterfall, it would enable this receiver to, do that. And that would be kind of really, really cool. One flaw also that I discovered on this radio is that if you use CW mode, well, CW mode should be technically on frequency. So an example is 8424. We have a channel marker. And on 8424, I believe it's SVO from Greece. So technically, if with SVO from Greece, you put this radio on CW mode, you should be hearing the Morse code. You're not. You have to tune about 500 hertz lower. So there's a flaw where CW doesn't operate like it should. CW should be on the frequency. You shouldn't have, because they have options to change the tone of the CW and all of that, which is nice. But the fact is, if you tune in CW a Morse code frequency, you won't hear anything. But if you tune about 500, 600 hertz below the frequency, you will hear it. So this means CW is not set right on this radio. They need to fix that. It would be very, very important to fix that because it is a flaw. Another flaw that I have a hard time with on this radio, the AGC. Even though you play with the AGC speeds and the AGC options, a good automatic gain control will compensate for lower and higher signals. So as the signal gets weaker, the radio compensates, and you have the impression that the volume level is always the same. This radio has a hard time with that. So when the signals go weaker, you tend to put the volume higher because the signal, you're having a hard time listening to it. And then the signal booms real strong, and now it's overloading and too strong. So that is a flaw also that is annoying and will contribute to fatigue over time. So that also is something that I don't know if they can fix it in a firmware update soon, but this is something they should look at. Even though I've played with the settings, you can't have a really satisfying automatic gain control on it. Of course, it has a squelch capability in the VHF range if you listen to amateur bands or the air band, things like that. I've listened to the air band on it. Sensitive pretty much across the board, especially with an external antenna. Once again, I can't stress it enough. It actually isn't that much of a portable in the sense that it doesn't, the sensitivity is not that great with the telescopic. So it more is like interesting with some external antennas, somewhat, even if it's just a piece of wire. The biggest, probably the biggest feature on this radio that's driving everybody crazy, and I have to say, probably the best implementation of noise reduction I've seen in any radio, even better than what my ICOM, my Yaesu, sorry, FTDX10 is, and I mean that's an IN transceiver. The noise reduction on this is so good that I was surprised that most of the time I leave it on because I find it really good at removing the noise around the signal. And so it makes the signal kind of easy to listen to. Now, remember, this is not a miracle. If a signal is in the noise and barely or not audible, this doesn't remove noise and then suddenly, hey, magic, you have a signal. It doesn't work like that. It just cleans up what it can receive. And so that's important to understand because I've seen a lot of people say, oh, it brings up signals like, that are under the noise. No, it doesn't bring any signal from under the noise. It just brings a clear signal of something it can already hear above the noise floor. And that's very important to understand. It comes with a small manual that kind of gets to the point, but this being a very complex radio, you'll have to learn, there's a learning curve on this test. And that's very important to understand. Quality of construction looks nice. The tuning knob doesn't mute. So I told you it doesn't mute at all. This is really cool because you can tune around. And you press on it and it changes from either the tuning knob or the volume control. So that is also nice. Receiver uses a 21700 battery, which is here. This is like an 18650, but it's bigger. So it gives a lot more power. It's typically about 5,000 milliamp hour. I've used it on the battery for many, many hours, and actually it was great. And I got 12 hours of battery easily. And I don't know how much more I would have gotten if I've used it more. But and that's even with the bias T on, that's powering an antenna outside. So it's pretty cool. I would use, some people were saying, well, maybe you could use I have a second or two or three other 21700s. I would actually prefer personally with this, I would use a battery pack, a rechargeable battery pack instead. That's what I would bring with me and just plug it in because it is USB-C charging, and that would work great. There's, of course, earphone that you could put. FM is in stereo. It has RDS on the display. And we're going to have a lot of videos of the different options that I want to show everybody and talk about. So more videos to come on the Mlite 880. This is my quick review, and I hope that it might help you. And, should I buy it or not? It's up to you. If you enjoy my videos, please subscribe. Thanks for watching my review.